All right. Well, welcome again, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. My name is Odette Falone. I am Inspired Instructions Director of Product and Services, and I am very happy to be here today to be talking to you about structuring effective PLCs. So we have a very robust webinar for you this afternoon. Lots of great, information, but also some wonderful and effective resources to share with you before we wrap up at the end of today. So please do, be advised that I will be sharing any content that I display for you today during the webinar with you at the end, and you'll be able to utilize, implement immediately as soon as your heart desires. So I'm happy to be able to do that and share that with you this afternoon. All right, so jumping right into our agenda for today, we're going to start just with a quick overview of what PLCs are and talk a little bit about some of the common obstacles that you might be facing in terms of implementing them in your school or district. I know PLCs is one of those buzzwords that education has had, out and about now for a while. So I'm sure we're very familiar with the meaning of it, but we'll talk a little bit further into some of the details, some of the myths, and again, some of those obstacles that you might be facing as you implement. All right, so a second piece we're going to be discussing is creating a PLC purpose. So how can we keep our teams motivated and focused when teachers and your staff are working in their PLC and their professional learning communities? How can we keep them on task and start delivering those results and keep those PLCs effective? So we'll share a little bit about how we can create a structure, create that purpose, and keep all team members with their eyes on the prize. Third, we'll dive into a little bit of how to develop that culture of empowerment. So really that piece is going to be all about how we create the conditions that teachers need to succeed. So giving them the tools, the resources, the support that they need to feel that empowerment and have, those skills to be able to move forward and create that successful PLC. The last piece of our webinar today will be on structuring PLCs for success. This is going to be the heftiest piece of the webinar in that we're going to be talking about putting all of these pieces of the puzzle together and really creating that blueprint for sustained success. So here I'll be sharing with you templates and tools, frameworks for questions and things like that that you can use when structuring, when facilitating PLCs in your schools in the future. Okay. And please do be advised that at the end, we will have time for questions. If there's anything that's lingering, please feel free to put it in the chat. I will check through those and we'll get a chance to answer any questions you might have at the end. Absolutely, without a doubt. So I don't want to leave any questions unturned. All right. So as I said, that first piece, the PLC overview, what exactly is a PLC and what are some common obstacles? So as I said, I'm aware that many of us are probably very familiar with what a PLC is. It stands for Professional Learning Community. And a definition that we could use to really succinctly define that is that PLCs are an ongoing process in which educators work collaboratively in recurring cycles of collective inquiry and action, research to achieve better results for the students they serve. I bolded a couple of pieces there really because when it comes down to it with PLCs, collaboration and results are really just a very important, both very important pieces, of what we're working with there. A little myth I'd like to share about collaboration, though, is that, most people think they love to collaborate, right? They love to get together and chat with their colleagues and all of that. However, that's not collaboration, right? Collaboration is a difficult task. It requires time, it requires practice, it requires accountability. And really, when it boils down to it, it's not exactly something that people would seek to do or particularly enjoy doing. But it's something that we have to really consider that collaboration is not necessarily just talking things over and thinking about that. Just giving people the time to work does not necessarily create the environment that we envision when we think of a PLC, right? We want them to be focused and we want them to result in measurable action. And that's what true collaboration does. And it really takes time and persistence and coaching to be able to do that effectively. So, of course, our eyes are on the prize. We want those better results for students, the students that we serve. And if we effectively collaborate, we can get there. So again, that collaboration piece is super important. We're going to be hitting on that very often today. In that term, community, professional learning community, collaboration is absolutely key. It's one of the biggest ideas behind it. But we really need to get to the nitty-gritty of what it means to collaborate and collaborate well and collaborate effectively. So we'll share a little bit about that today as well. So I want to hear from you a little bit. You can use the chat or of course feel free to unmute if you choose. But I want you to just share with me and reflect a little bit about what you envision and what you feel an effective PLC looks like. Okay. So imagine that you walk in a room where a professional learning community is taking place, a meeting is taking place. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel happening in that room? So take a moment and just, again, you can unmute or feel free to use the chat. Just share a quick sentence or a couple adjectives of things that you might see happening in that space. Okay, wonderful. So I'm seeing some responses rolling in, focus and collaboration, goal orientation, questions asked, how and why. Of course, collaboration, yes. Use of data and artifacts, discussion around students, curiosity, questions, data, absolutely. So all of these things, yes, taking notes, asking questions, how and why. Thank you for those of you that shared some of your thoughts with that. And I completely agree. All of these things are things that we want to hear, things we want to see when we envision an effective PLC. Okay, so if PLCs are working effectively, like those that you mentioned, with your visions in the previous slide with the chat there, they can do so many fantastic things for your school community. So again, if done well, if done effectively, PLCs can improve communication skills. They can provide teachers with other viewpoints and perspectives. Think about all of the wealth of knowledge that you have within the doors of your school. There's a consultant that works with Inspired Instruction here with us that always says to teachers, their best resource is right down the hall. And that's 100% true. Okay. So in a PLC, in a professional learning community, it's the perfect space to be able to engage teachers with each other, to share those resources and strategies that they find work well, and think about the number of students that you'd be able to reach if you're sharing that with several other teachers. So absolutely, a great thing that PLCs can do. They can also promote educational risk-taking. So while one teacher might feel uncomfortable trying a strategy, if they hear and see the results of that strategy in another teacher's classroom, it might give them the confidence they need to say, okay, well, if it can work there, it can work here too. So again, just all positive things that we can see with that effective use of PLCs. Could build interpersonal trust, improve conflict resolution skills, because of course, every PLC is not going to move without sometimes, two different opinions happening. So conflict resolution is always a part of that, something that we can all use practice. I can streamline student learning, and we'll dive into more of that a little bit later. Increase student achievement, of course, that's our goal. Provide support in a sometimes isolating profession. And, side note here, we do see that one of the number one reasons for burnout in new teachers is that they feel isolated. So developing a well-structured and effective PLC can help combat that. Because it is absolutely a statistic that we're seeing more and more often. And finally, it builds excitement and passion about teaching and learning. So really, if you take a look at this list as a whole, the majority of the research on PLCs really shows that it contributes to a positive school climate by improving staff communication and by improving collaboration skills. So all things that I'm sure as we're looking through this list, we would like to be able to see in our schools as well. Okay, So we want to be able, though, to draw that line and focus on student learning, results, and progress. So we want to outline for you a few things that PLCs should not be used for. Remember, as I said before, just giving teachers or staff the time doesn't necessarily mean that it's turning into an effective PLC. Sometimes, I'm sure, as we have seen in examples in our schools, perhaps, these meetings might turn into being used for things that might not necessarily move forward student progress. So we want to keep our eyes on that. Things that PLCs should not necessarily be used for are trainings that can be done during a faculty meeting. Planning of field trips, grading papers, or meetings about individual student behaviors. Okay, so if your PLC is focused on classroom management, you might have conversations about behaviors there, but not necessarily about one individual. Things that PLCs may be used for are professional development that's job embedded and closely aligned with essential outcomes. So in these professional learning communities, teachers should be walking away with strategies, with actionable items that they can embed into their teaching practice immediately that are aligned with the outcomes of your school. You could develop common assessments in a PLC, plan for differentiated instruction lessons, or even do some data analysis. Okay, so these are effective uses of a PLC as all team members are involved and it affects all students that are, related to these teachers. Okay, so having said all of that, I pulled this quote to share with you just because I felt like it was a great place to kind of discuss in terms of collaboration. So, PLCs are really not just another program. They're how we operate collectively to ensure that students achieve. So thinking of all of that, I'm going to read this quote to you. I just love it. So talking is not doing. Planning is not doing. Goal setting is not doing. Training is not doing. Even directing resources to support a plan is not doing. It's not until people are doing differently that any organization can expect different results. So this quote is by Rick DeFore. He is a PLC guru. And I really love this point that he's driving home, that all of these things, while we feel we might be collaborating and really making progress, if we're just talking, if we're just planning, if we're just using resources, it's not until we're doing things differently that we can expect those results. So, we just don't work collaboratively during meetings. It's that ongoing collaboration that students need from us in order to improve. So our students improve as much as we improve. So if we're doing differently, they're going to be doing differently. So before jumping into some of those positive shifts that you can make with PLCs, I want you to think for a moment about why teachers might not be feeling engaged and empowered during most PLCs in the first place. So this is a common theme that we're seeing from, hearing from many schools, that while their teachers have the time to collaborate in a PLC, they're not necessarily feeling that engagement, and that the time is maybe being spent to gripe about things, talk about stress, frustration, things like that. So I want to think about some of the that you feel participants might be facing. Just take a moment and jot some of those for me in the chat before I share some with you. Okay, great. So again, we're thinking about what are some obstacles that we face with starting PLCs, or what are some things that you feel teachers are saying and talking about during PLCs. Okay. All right. So absolutely, buy-in is an obstacle when it comes to PLCs, right? Teachers need to be invested and see that there's going to be results when they work through this, process. During PLCs, you might notice personality clashes with other members. Absolutely, definitely in the realm of reality here, what we see very often. Um, Purpose, structure, maybe if the PLCs are not structured properly. You guys are hitting all the nails on the head right now. Investment. Teachers have that lack of knowledge. They might not know exactly what they need to do to move forward. And that's totally valid on their end. If they are feeling that and they're feeling uncertain or there's ambiguity on what they need to be doing, there's not going to be forward progress during that time. And then on top of that, teachers are going to feel so frustrated that they sat in this meeting for whatever it is, half an hour, 40 minutes, and didn't get anything done. Okay? Because we all know that teachers and administrators and all school staff, time is not something we have a lot of. And every minute counts, every second counts. So if we're going to be working into having dedicated time for professional learning communities, we want that time to be spent wisely and for teachers to know exactly what the expectations are when they're moving forward. So just thank you so much for those of you that shared some of your thoughts on that. And I'm just going to share with you some common obstacles that we've heard from teachers in terms of starting PLCs and administrators. So one thing we hear is, okay, we do not have time. We don't have time for this. And I'm sure you can relate, and you've probably heard this one in the past. It definitely can be hard to provide the necessary hours that teachers would need to conduct professional learning communities, but there are schools that are making it happen. So you really just have to get creative, right? Ask the teachers for help. If you really want to do this, you'll find a way. So whether you do like a late start on some days and you have coverage in that way, and teachers have that time in the morning, or you set up, rework schedules so that there's common planning time for teachers. You can ask your teachers for help to help setting up these types of schedules to make this happen. Another common obstacle is that teachers might say, okay, this is not going to make a difference, and as many of you said, they're not invested, they're not recognizing, what could happen and what kind of progress they could make. And of course, PLC members, if they're not given the support they need at the beginning, they're going to feel that way. They're not going to be able to collaborate effectively. So as one of you had mentioned in the chat a moment ago, they don't necessarily have the knowledge on how to run an effective PLC. And if they're not given the support, that time is going to be spent in a way that does not necessarily make much progress at all. And of course, we will go deeper into that soon, just about how we can share some tools, strategies, resources to provide them with that and empower them to be able to make a difference with their PLCs. A third piece is we don't know how to do them correctly. And again, this was, like I said, you guys hit all the nails on the head here. And this is a very common thread in terms of what teachers are feeling when it comes to PLCs. They say, we're not sure how to do this right. And there's really no one way to set up a PLC, but it's up to the administrative team to really delineate a clear set of expectations to their teachers. So whether you're setting up a literacy team, an administrative team, an instructional support team, maybe a team for all core subjects, in order for it to be successful, there needs to be clear expectations from leadership. And then again, moving forward in terms of facilitating at the beginning and getting the ball rolling for them in that way. And we'll share some ways that we can outline and create a cycle for PLCs in just a moment. All right. So again, I'm just going to provide a quick gentle reminder before we move on to our next piece here, that it's really best practice for admin to attend each team's meeting at least once a month. So as a member though, so we say admin, administrators should join in to those PLCs as a member, not to formally observe. And really that's just best practice. So some benefits of an administrator being involved in a PLC: it provides open communication, improves school climate, sense of leadership, shared leadership, improved interpersonal trust, increased feelings of support, and increased teacher effectiveness. So all of these pieces, these are all research supported, statistics here that these PLCs will benefit in these ways if administrators are involved. And again, involving themselves as a member of the team, but not necessarily observing the team, right? Being a member could mean that you're part of the facilitation process. You're part of outlining some expectations and part of empowering the teachers, but not just sitting back, watching and seeing what's happening. All right. So creating a PLC purpose. In order to accomplish that foundation of establishing PLCs, as we said, every team needs a PLC purpose or a purpose statement. This is what describes the reason why the team exists in the first place. So if you really get your teachers and staff involved in creating that purpose statement, it gets their minds thinking, okay, why am I here? What is the reason for this meeting in the first place? And gives that central goal and it gives them the, involvement in creating that purpose moving forward. So I feel it's a very important step in the very beginning stages of creating a PLC is thinking of that PLC purpose and working as a team to create it. So everyone's involved and everyone has that ownership of that purpose. Okay. So in order to create that statement, I'm sharing with you an activity called the Goyles activity. Not the best name in the world, I know, but it stands for groups of increasingly larger size. And this activity, again, is a great starter for when you're just beginning to roll out your PLCs. And it allows all teachers and all members of the team to create a piece of what the team's purpose statement is. So this activity, this resource will be shared with you, at the end of today's webinar. But here's kind of how it works, essentially, is that we have the PLC purpose. What is the purpose of this PLC? You would start is independently writing down your response to this question, right in that box here. And then you partner up with one other team member. And those two people read each other's responses and combine their responses to create combined response number one. From there, that team of two meets up with another team of two, and they meet together and combine both of their response number ones to create response number two. From there, you meet with a third team. So now you have two teams of four meeting together and so on. So if you have a very large PLC group, you might need a couple more boxes here. Otherwise, from this combined response, the whole group comes together, looks at their combined response number three, and puts that together to create one cohesive purpose statement that has inclusions from every single team member. And this is something that you can refer back to frequently at the beginning of every single PLC meeting to remind everyone, okay, this is the purpose, this is why we're here, and here's what we're doing with this time. So some sample purpose statements here could be very simple: to plan, share, and collaborate for student growth, to better understand our students in academics and citizenship. Okay, so all of that to say that it's just a great way to kind of engage everyone in becoming a part of that purpose statement creation. Okay. All right, let me move on. All right. So the three big ideas behind PLCs, this is really just the essence of the PLC process, is that we want to focus on learning, focus on results, and collaborate. Again, we're going to hone in on each of these, and we have been more or less with each piece of our webinar today. But this is what we want to keep in mind when we're creating our purpose statement, and keep in mind when we create our SMART goals moving forward as well. All right, so developing a culture of empowerment. Just going to go through a quick few things here, strategies that we can use to share and empower our teachers to develop these effective PLCs. Effective empowerment does not necessarily mean encouraging people to go off and do whatever they want. It means really just creating the conditions that help people succeed. So the role of a school leader would be in that place, right? To create that, to create that support system that teachers might need in order to succeed moving forward in the PLC process. So some conditions that help people succeed are follows. Establishing clear purpose and priorities. So that again is all involved in describing what is the purpose of a PLC. Let's create that purpose. Think about those three pieces we just went through a moment ago, the essence of a PLC, and providing access to resources that enable them to make informed decisions. So I'll share some tools very shortly that can help with outlining and guiding teachers in the beginning stages of those PLC meetings, engaging them in establishing clear benchmarks to monitor progress, ensuring that they have relevant and timely data, and providing training and support and resources to lead to success. So again, not just sending them off and saying, here's a PLC time, make a SMART goal and start working. If teachers are not trained and supported in how to run a PLC effectively, most likely that situation is going to be a flop. Okay. So some things that, you want to consider in terms of teacher input and responsibility. These are the kinds of things that teachers are involved in when working in a PLC. So they're going to work towards creating that PLC purpose. They're going to work on creating group norms. And I'll share with you in a few moments a great template that makes it nice and easy for PLC members to think of some group norms and work together to collaborate on that. Teachers will be responsible for setting agendas, right? So they're going to work from that agenda each day. And then at the end of every meeting, you want to set time aside to make next meeting's agenda and work, with the ends in mind. They're going to input on essential outcomes. They're going to create those SMART goals, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Common assessments, student data, and development of differentiated lesson plans. All of these things are products that could come out from an effective PLC in terms of teacher input. Now, on the administrator side, the administrator's role might be a little bit different. The administrator would be an organizer and a participant. So they're determining what time, when this is taking place, where, who's going to be in what groups, those types of things. They're providing teachers with a time and location for the meeting and modeling that effective communication. And finally, they're providing training materials necessary for success. So a few of which we'll talk about in a moment. So as a leader, you'll first need to kind of reflect on what your vision for the team is, right? So creating that empowered PLC team involves various shifts as you gradually move, your team to a higher level of maturity, let's call it. And here we have 3 different levels that Harvard researchers developed in terms of how teams, work through ways that make them effective. Okay, so we have manager-led teams. This could be our first level of PLC teams. And in this situation, the school's leadership team, the administrators, decide what's going to happen during the PLC and leads it. This is our most common type of PLC that we see. And of course, it's where most groups begin. Self-managing teams is where teachers start to make the decisions regarding the focus of each upcoming PLC meeting, and team members start to hold themselves accountable and one another accountable. And finally, self-designing teams. This one has most teacher autonomy, in which teachers have the discretion in deciding the content, the structure, and even the team members. So maybe in the past, you have a large 4th grade team and all of them were in one PLC together. This self-designing team might say, you know what, we're going to split this group in half, and this group's going to focus on this, and the other one's going to focus on that. And again, really, it's just the teacher autonomy is much higher because these are very well-trained, and very mature in terms of PLC teams. So I want you to think about those 3 levels and consider what level your school is at currently and where you want to be. You don't need to answer it out loud, but just I want you to think about that in terms of these 3 levels that we discussed here. Where do you see your school right now? And where do you want your school to be? Maybe you say, okay, I really like the idea of self-designing teams, but I'd be really happy if we're in that self-managing team section where there's some administrator input and some teacher input, and it's kind of a very nice balance. And that's fine too. It's just a reflection question for you to think about. Okay. So we've reached part 4 here, structuring PLCs for success. And I'm going to share, as I said, several different resources with you, as well as some guiding planning questions that can really help in terms of structuring and creating that blueprint for your effective PLCs in your school. Okay, so, and remember, if at any time you want to return back to this webinar to watch it, it will be recorded. It is recorded and will be available on our website for access at any time. So these are some questions that we say, okay, would be a great place to start in terms of the PLC planning process. These were released from the New Jersey Department of Education, but they're absolutely relevant for all states as they guide the planning process, no matter where your PLC is taking place. So again, just starting from the beginning here, we want to think, how does it make sense to organize teachers into teams at your school? Every school has a different situation. And again, there's no one right way, as I said before. You might want to do them by grade level. You might want to do them by students taught. If you have, several teachers that are working with similar students, it's really up to you and what makes the most sense and, would be most beneficial for your school and your students. Which staff members do not fit into teams? So of course, you're going to have some teachers or staff members that are in roles that might not necessarily fit into a grade level team or so on. But we want to make sure that all staff is included. So are you creating a new PLC with a different, goal? Maybe you have commonalities in students taught, and that's where those teachers are going to fit. These are all things that you want to consider when planning. What common time do you have now, and is that time flexible? So I know it can be very overwhelming to think of the thought of having to find time for all of these staff members to meet and in a common planning time. So this is where you want to begin. Do your teachers participate in any other common meetings? And if so, how was that time found in the first place? So how can we arrange things in a similar fashion to allow teachers to have that opportunity to collaborate? And finally, what does your collective bargaining agreement say about time and your school day? So what are the parameters you need to work within related to time? This is obviously a very important thing to consider because we want to make sure that we're within those parameters when we are planning our PLCs. Okay. So once you've arranged or been able to make those arrangements and you've set up your teams, here we can start to talk about creating PLC norms. In order to try to, overcome and combat those obstacles of staff members taking time during a PLC to, to digress or to, gripe about things or to vent. And of course, that's going to happen. In schools, it's all part of it, but we want to try to keep that to a minimum, of course, during PLCs and keep the progress moving forward. Norms are something that can 100% absolutely help with that. And I have a template here that I'm going to share with you at the end that you can use during one of your first PLC meetings in a cycle to create these norms, okay? Norms can help clarify expectations, promote open dialogue, and serve as a very powerful tool for holding members accountable, especially if all teachers are involved in creating these norms. So you'll see some questions here, and as a team, you'll talk and think about them. So what time are we going to meet? When's the beginning and end? Some PLC meetings include a 5-minute window at the beginning to get all those things off their chest that they want to say, and then they start their PLC. And sometimes that might be what your teachers need in order to really concentrate and focus on the goal and the task at hand, okay? So you talk about things like how you're going to encourage participants to listen to each other, discourage interruptions, who are these meetings going to be open to? How are you going to make decisions, deal with conflicts? What's the attendance policy going to be? And what are the expectations in terms of participation and things like that? So as a team, you collaborate to create these norms and everyone agrees on what you'd like to see in each meeting. And this is something that you want to refer back to at the beginning of each and every PLC meeting. Here are our norms. Some schools have them posted up on a piece of chart paper in the room that they meet. They review that, and it's just as a reminder to say, okay, this is where we want to be and how we want to, move forward with our meeting. So absolutely valuable piece. Again, I'll share that with you at the end of our webinar today. Something that we mentioned earlier is SMART goals. So SMART goals can be a very big part of professional learning communities, as it's what clarifies what students should learn. It clarifies the standard of learning expected and the measures that you're using to determine if students have achieved that standard or not. So this template here, I will share with you as well, but it just outlines each of those pieces. SMART standing for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. I have a couple extra letters I'd like to add into that sheet as I kind of review what each piece is. But once your team decides, okay, what do we want to see as an outcome from this particular PLC meeting? What is going to be, the progress that we make, that progress that we see, okay? And it really clarifies that and makes it very easy to action items and move forward towards meeting this goal. So in terms of specific, there's some questions here, and this can help create a very SMART goal. We want specific goals, but we also want them to be strategic. So your goals should be straightforward and very clearly written. M for measurable, if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. So in order for the goal to see success, we want it to be something measurable. A for attainable, but of course we also want it to be action-oriented. Goals have to have active verbs, not passive verbs, right? So who is doing what and how is that going to happen? That's all part of that A section of SMART goals. For R, we want our goals to be relevant, but also rigorous. We want them to be realistic, and we want them to be results focused. So a goal is not just an activity. It's what makes clear. A goal is what makes clear what's going to be different as a result of achieving that goal. Okay. And finally, time bound. We also want our goals to be tracked. So they need to have a deadline. Deadlines help us all take action. We all know that. So if our goals have these components, they're more likelihood to have success. Some quick examples of, or a quick example of a SMART goal that includes all of these pieces is the following. This year, right, we have a timeline in place. At least 90% of our students will meet or exceed the target score of 3 on each strand of our summative writing prompt in May. Okay, so there's a lot of components in that goal, but it's very specific, and it gives a very targeted approach to what it is exactly that you're aiming for and helps think of actionable items to make that happen. An example of what a SMART goal is not could be the following. Students will improve their reading comprehension. Okay, great. That has a nice thought behind it, but we need to add a few more components to make that goal SMART, include some specific details, some measurable details, and that time-bound component as well. All right, so that, again, I'll share with you in just a few moments. In terms of keeping that PLC structured and organized, this PLC agenda planner, which I'll share with you later, can help do that. So PLCs really work when they're productive, and each meeting should end by creating the agenda for the next meeting, as I said earlier. So this template here has a space for the norms to be put each and every time, the SMART goal that you create there, and then some strategy and action steps, listing who's responsible, when they're going to complete it, and the evidence that it got done. So again, this is just a way to keep yourself organized and to, keep that progress moving each and every time you have a meeting. A couple quick pieces here before I wrap up. This resource is called 4 Strategic Questions to Guide Effective PLCs. This is a very succinct way to describe, really the essence of what PLCs are asking each and every time in a cycle, right? So if we start with that first question that I put a star there, what are your anticipated learning outcomes for students? In an initial meeting of a PLC, once you have your goal, you're thinking about this question. And in terms of that, you might look through your power standards or your learning targets or your essential questions and start to get the answer for that. What exactly is it that you're looking for students to do or accomplish? From there, Whoops, let me head back, sorry. From there, you're going to move on to that yellow box. How will you determine if students have successfully achieved those outcomes? So are you going to use formative assessment? Are you going to use common assessments? Are you going to use data analysis? These are topics that you could use to answer that question. Then we move down to what actions are you going to take if students successfully attain those goals, okay? So are you going to enrich, differentiate, do some self-directed learning? And then finally, what actions will you take if students don't attain those desired goals or outcomes? Are you going to differentiate there or use some targeted small group instruction? And all of these pieces, you know, kind of hover around the goal and that you've created. All right. And then you finally move back up to that top part and think about those learning outcomes again and move in that cycle. So these questions can really guide, you know, those conversations that you're having in your PLCs and keep you focused in on what exactly you're looking to achieve and accomplish with your students' learning. Okay, so taking all of that and kind of summing it up here, I'm going to break down those 4 questions I just shared with you and show you how one PLC cycle might look. And again, this might be something that takes place within a couple of weeks. It might be a cycle that takes place within one full marking period. It might even be a cycle that takes place over a course of a year. It's really dependent on what your SMART goal is and what the desired outcomes are. So for a PLC cycle, you could start with that question. What are our anticipated outcomes for students? Then from there, we move on to say, okay, we figured that out. Let's create a SMART goal. Let's, you know, get an action plan going. Maybe you create a common assessment to implement throughout, you know, all of that grade level. From there, you teach, okay? You say, all right, now I'm in the classroom. I'm going to implement these strategies that we talked about in our PLC. I'm going to check for progress with formative assessments. I'm going to come back to my next PLC meeting and tell them how it went and, you know, what things I might need to change or tweak. From there, you're going to ask that second question. How are we going to determine if students have successfully achieved these outcomes? So you might from there think, okay, we're going to start to give that common assessment that we created now. Let's analyze those results in our next PLC meeting and think about what are the trends, what are the commonalities here. From there, we're going to say, okay, what actions will we take if students attain them and what actions will we take if they don't? And there you're going to be able to develop some of those insights and turn them into action, okay? And then the cycle repeats itself over again, okay? So that's how it kind of moves through each and every one of those questions with these components within. Okay, so just a few tips to promote PLC acceptance from me to you as we kind of wrap up this afternoon. I just want to share, again, some few tips because I know this was a lot of information, a lot to take in. And I hope that, you know, it really was eye-opening in some sense that there are some structures and tools and strategies out there that can help support you and your staff in promoting successful PLCs. So some tips from me are just to start slowly. Take baby steps. If PLCs are new to your district or you want to start fresh with them, you know, really just do some check-ins 2 to 3 times a year and ask your staff members to reflect a little bit on their strengths during PLCs, on their weaknesses, or what they might like to improve. And just again, keep in mind, we're starting slowly, take baby steps in this process. Second, to integrate formal and informal collaboration. So really just invite teachers that are still reluctant to participate in PLCs to be an active member, right? And just accept all different levels of commitment here. So we might see that some are really all in, and that's wonderful, but others might be collaborating in their own way. So really accept that. And then as teachers and staff members start to see the difference that PLCs can make, you'll start to notice that there will become more buy-in as you go. Third piece is just to persevere. PLCs take time to grow. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. They're going to have their ups and downs, as all social and professional groups do. So just keep that in mind, to persevere and keep moving forward. And finally, learn to let go. So once that PLC is fully integrated into the teacher's work, you can start to ask teachers to lead a little bit and, you know, foster that autonomy of the PLC itself, have it move through the maturity levels that we shared a little while ago. But yeah, that's my tips for promoting PLC acceptance and hopefully acquiring some buy-in. Now we've reached our question session. I just want to thank you so very much for your time and attention this afternoon. I appreciate your participation through the chat and sharing with me some of your thoughts and ideas. My email address is here on the screen, odette.falone@inspiredinstruction.com, and our website is also listed there, inspiredinstruction.com. So I'm going to just ask that while we work through the Q&A section, you can share some of your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to put in the chat here a link to our evaluation form or feedback form, you want to call it, to share with us some of your thoughts about today's session. I would greatly appreciate it and love to hear from you. So the link is there for you to access now. Otherwise, I'll be here for any questions that you might have. And I hope that you found today's session helpful and valuable. So thank you again so much, everyone. Any questions for me? I'm going to check the chat as well if there's anyone that has questions there.
Odette, I had a question. I wanted to find out how soon will the recorded be available online?
Oh, great question. So we will actually have the recording up hopefully by the end of today. So, I can share with you if you'd like. I can send you an email with that. We can have an email sent to you with the recording as well, or the link to the recording if you'd like, when it's ready.
That is Rosetta. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm actually driving, and that was my question too, when the PowerPoint would be made available.
Oh, great. Yes, absolutely. So yes, it will hopefully be available by the end of today. And I thank you so much, Rosetta, for attending. So drive safely, but I appreciate that your presence here with us today.
Thank you.
Of course. So I saw a question here in the chat, a couple of questions, one about the resources. Yes, I will be sharing, you will be receiving a one sheet, I hope, at some point tomorrow, that will have links to all the PDFs to everything that I share with you today. The norms template, the agenda, the 4 questions, the GOILS activity, all of that stuff will be there for you linked. So I believe within 24 to 48 hours at the most. And the second question there, will there be future sessions? Yes, so we do actually present a webinar every month. Next month's webinar won't necessarily be on PLCs, but we do offer 2 very extensive and robust workshops on PLCs that we can present to your school or present to your school leaders. So please feel free to contact us after today if that's something that you're interested in as well.
I have a quick question. Is it okay to use the voice?
Oh, absolutely. Please go right ahead.
Okay. Is there any different facilitation or kind of resources, I guess, like when it is teacher-led versus administrative-led, or when the teams differentiate based on students versus content and grade levels? Is there any different supports for that?
Yes, absolutely. So we do, in terms of work that we do offer workshops for teachers specifically on how to run and lead PLCs. So that is something that we have available. We do have resources that can support teachers in the differentiation piece, like you said, because we are aware that there are so many different types of teachers in so many different areas and grade levels, and that oftentimes there might be a feeling of someone unfit in a team and things like that. So we want to make sure that all of that is reached. But yes, we do offer workshops on that. So I can, if you like, I can take your information and we can kind of collaborate on that if you'd like to get some more information moving forward.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you so much.
Oh, great. Sure. Thank you. All right. So I'm just going to jot down your name, Stacy. Thank you. All right. I'm going to just stop our recording, but I am still here for questions if anybody has any as they're filling out and things like that. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right.